We read in the second parsha of this week's parsha, in b'chukosai teilechu, if you walk in my statutes, es mitzvosai tishmru, and you observe my mitzvos, v'asisem osam, you do them. Nosati gishmechem b'itom, I will give your rains in their time. V'nosno oretz es yivulo, the earth will give, or the land will give its bounty. V'etzaso de'ite imperial, and the tree of the field will give its fruit. We speak about unlimited blessing if you walk in my statutes. There's a midrash in this week's parsha. In B'chusai Teilechu Zesh Omer HaKosuv, the midrash cites a pasuk, a verse from Eov, from Job. Im Charutzi Miyomov Mispa Chadosh Vitoch Chuka V'Osisa V'Lo Yavor. What is the meaning of these words? What is the meaning Im Charutzi Miyomov? If his days are carved out, B'Shosha HaKadosh Baruch Hu Boro Lomo, when God created his world, Choratz Yomov Shel Kelach V'Echod, each individual's days, the degree of his life was carved out for him. Shenemar, as it says, the time of creation, Voyu La'osos, Ulamoadim Liyom Vishonim, is regarding the luminaries. They will be signs, there will be holidays, there will be days, there will be years. Ulami Nosnam, and to who were they given? Li Yisrael, to the Jewish people. Shenema Magid Vorov Liyaakov. He had said over his words to Yaakov, Chukav Mishpatul Yisrael, his statutes and his laws to Yisrael. Mispar Chadosh Itoch, the number of months are with you. Chukav Osiso, you've performed the statutes, Lo Yavar, it will not cross. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. Hashem says to the Jewish people, Im asisim es chukai, if you uphold my statutes, Ein hasoton nogea bochem, Satan will not be able to touch you. You're protected from soton. Shenemar, as it says in the verse, V'lo yavor, he will not pass. He will not be able to cross that line. Avon einchom osim chukai, but if you don't observe my statutes, Harei hasoton nogea bochem, Satan will be able to touch you. Shenemar, midei ovro, when he crosses, yikach etzchem, he will take you. Chukov osis lo yavor, if you observe his statutes, you do his statutes, he will not cross. Ken omarti l'shlomo. This is what I said to King Solomon, Sho sho'ol as hachochma, when he asked for unlimited wisdom. Ma marti lo, what did I say to him? Even what you didn't ask, I've given to you. Gam osher, gam kavod, wealth and honor, glory. If you observe the Torah and its statutes, the angel of death cannot touch you. If you walk in my ways to observe my chukim, my statutes and my mitzvos, kasher holach David avicho, as your father David had walked, herechti, v'arachti yomecha, I will extend your life. Odom rishon ilu shamar satorah v'samitzvos shesatilo, Adam, the first human being, if he would have observed the Torah and the mitzvos which I gave to him, lo yomes, he would have died. What Eov is saying, as the Midrash is saying, each person has so many years to live from the time that he comes into existence. If he wants to live out those years fully, it's only if Satan doesn't come upon him. Now, what will protect one from Satan not coming upon the person That's only if he observes the chukim, the statute. What is the statute we're speaking about? As Rashi says, if you toil in the Torah, if you study Torah, you invest it fully in Torah study, Satan will not be able to come upon you. What does this mean? We find that Rosh Hashanah is known as Yom Adin, based on a verse in Tehillim. The Torah doesn't say explicitly Rosh Hashanah is the day of judgment, but it's the day of judgment. What does it mean it's the day of judgment? Why does God allow one's record to be audited, to be scrutinized, to be reviewed on Rosh Hashanah? What happens on Rosh Hashanah which doesn't happen throughout the year? So the Ramchal explains that no one has a perfect record. Everyone's record is flawed. And Shlomo tells us, there's no tzaddik in existence who does only good and doesn't sin. Every tzaddik has some degree of spiritual failing. So if that's the case, so why is he prosecuted for that failing? The answer is we have what we call midas harachmin. Midas harachmin, the attribute of mercy, means that Hashem does not allow Satan to prosecute the record unless he allows him. So as long as the record is not audited and not prosecuted, midas harachmin protects the person. And whatever goodness, whatever kindness, whatever amenities Hashem gives, the person is a beneficiary of that. However, Rosh Hashanah, which is the day of judgment, where every human being's record is audited and scrutinized, Hashem, that's the day Hashem allows Satan to prosecute. He allows him to introduce evidence that the person should be found guilty. We have the schus, we have the merit of the Akedah, we have the shofar, which represents the Akedah. The moment Satan hears the blast of the shofar, the silence is his prosecution. But until then, the prosecution of Satan is what? Is overly intense. And you cannot withstand this. During the year, Hashem does not allow the Satan even to introduce evidence, to prosecute. However, the Gemara tells us that a person could bring prosecution on himself. For instance, if a person puts his life in jeopardy irresponsibly, which you're not permitted to, that's a basis for prosecution. If you don't value your own life, therefore God says he allows Satan to prosecute. If a person says the Amidah, the Shemon Esrei, with intense kavanah, intent, and he feels that he's deserving that God should respond to his tefillah. If you feel you're deserving, the moment the person feels that sense of entitlement, I'm entitled to an answer. Now the question is, why are you entitled? It's evidently you're someone. You're somebody we have to reckon with. Let's see who you are. The moment the person raises his profile above the radar screen, Satan says, who is this man? God allows that person to be prosecuted. That means his record is being audited. This is the understanding. So Hashem says, we're always vulnerable to prosecution. What will keep the Satan, the prosecutor, at bay? If you keep my statutes, you learn Torah, you invest in Torah, you toil in Torah, even though there's reason for prosecution, God says, I will not allow that prosecution to take place. So even though record is flawed, it's a flawed record, but as a result of this, you'd be able to live out your days. The days that initially were designated to be your days, you will live those days fully. But the moment God allows the prosecutor to prosecute the record, that, God forbid, could actually shorten the person's life. And that's what he means. Each person has his days cut out for him. To the moment. You live so many days, so many hours, so many minutes, so many moments. Because you were given that amount of time to address your mission, your objective in existence, to perfect your spirituality. But what happens if you have a flawed record? It's not simple. But that's only a problem if we speak about midas hadin. Now, what does not allow Satan to prosecute? That's the lo yavor. If you keep my chukim, you keep my statute of Torah, and you're invested in that, You'll have Richas Yomim. You will have length of days, and this is what Hashem says to Shlomo. I've given you wisdom, I've given you wealth, I've given you glory. But if you want to live out your days to the fullest extent, as your father did, then you have to observe my chukim. If you observe the statute and you're committed to the study of Torah, fully invested, then you'll be able to live out your days, because the prosecution will not take place. Now, there's a Mishnah. The Mishnah cites a verse that Yirmiyahu Hanavi, Jeremiah the prophet, says that im lo brisa yom v'loilo, if not for my covenant, which is in effect day and night continuously, chulkas shemayim v'ortz lusamti, the extent of heaven and earth would not be in place. So the Gemara tells us that it's only, why does the world continue to function? Why did God create existence? As it says at the beginning of creation, Bereshis bar Elokim eser shemayim v'aretz. It's for the sake of Torah God created its existence. So if the Jews engage in Torah study, the world continues. If there's ever a moment, Rav Chaim Volozhin cites a Zohar, that if there's ever a moment where there's nowhere in existence any Jew studying Torah, the world reverts back to pre-existence. So when one studies Torah, what is one doing? One is actually causing existence should exist. So a person who's involved in existence, in the process of maintaining existence, what is he actually? He's God's partner in creation. God wills existence. But when does God will existence? Only if it meets its objective. What's the objective? The objective is the study of Torah. So therefore, in chukai, if you observe my chukai, my statute, that you're toiling in Torah, so the process of toiling in Torah, that is the basis for existence. Because God only willed existence for that purpose. So God says, you're my partner in creation. So as long as you're willing that existence, I'm willing existence as long as it's addressing the objective. So if you're my partner in that, therefore I will not allow Satan to prosecute. Because the moment Satan prosecutes, that invokes midas adin. That's the attribute of justice. Attribute of justice, the word cannot continue. So I will not allow the invocation of Satan's prosecution if you're engaging in Torah, because then the world cannot continue. Therefore, it goes hand in hand. So Rashi explains, he cites the Midrash. What is this referring to? Zekiyum HaMitzvos. What does it mean you should walk in my statutes, seemingly the fulfillment of the mitzvos? He says, but it can't be. Because the verse a little further says, Es mitzvosai tishmuru, you observe my mitzvos. Hamani mekayim b'chukosai teilechu, shetiu amelim b'Torah. That if you toil in Torah, then you will merit unlimited bounty. But if you don't toil in Torah, you will not merit unlimited bounty. So over here, the Baal HaTurim explains, Im choksai teilechu v'esmitzvosai tishmu v'asisem osam, and you will do them. So he explained the letters osam and the letters of emes are the same letters. They just have to be rearranged. Osam means them, asisem osam, and you will do them. The letters aleph, tov, mem, and the letters emes are the same letters. What does that mean? We say on Shabbos and Yom Tov, we say v'tar limeinu la'ovtcho be'emes. We ask God, kachenu mitzvosecho, sanctify us with your mitzvos. V'seichel kein b'sorasecho, give us our portion in Torah. V'taher limeinu, purify our hearts. La'ovtcho be'emes, to serve you in truth. It's not simple. Unless you have purity of heart, you can't serve God with truth. It's not an easy thing. You have to first be sanctified in the mitzvos, to receive your portion in Torah, and then we ask, and even when we have our portion, we should serve you, we should serve you selflessly, in total truth, in purity. But that only comes through the purification of the heart. Now, how does one observe Torah in the context of truth? Shlo d'shmo. person studies Torah with an ulterior motive, to ingratiate himself for the sake of honor and glory or financial gain. It's deficient. Deficient. How does one merit unlimited bounty? It's only vasisa mosa. If you do the mitzvos with a truthfulness for the sake of the mitzvah, that's the way it's meant to be performed, then you merit unlimited bounty. But if there's any degree of self-interest, the blessing doesn't follow. It's only vasisim osam, when you do them with truth. Now, what determines whether you do something with truth or you don't do something with that pure intent? What is the determining factor? The Maral, in his work known as the Sivas Olam, the pathways of the world, so he speaks about, in one chapter, it's called The Pathway of Torah. So he writes, and other works cite the same Chazal, that we find that we have 248 positive mitzvos aseh, positive commandments. The human body has 248 parts to it. There's a corresponding factor between the positive commandment and one part of the body. That means when you do a certain positive commandment, it sanctifies a certain part of the body and sanctifies a certain part of one's neshama, one's soul. Now, a human being as a physical being, although we're infused with a neshama, with a soul, basically what is a human being? A human being is an intellectual animal. Every animalistic drive that exists in the animal exists within the human being. Now, how does one temper that animal, these drives, these uncontrollable drives, which are an inclination? How do we temper that? Only one way. They have to be spiritualized. If you take the person and you spiritualize him, then you're able to take control. Then, because the animal, which is mundane and physical, which is inclined only to things which have no relevance to spirituality, to Kedusha, it changes its whole innate direction, because its innateness has changed. It's because it's sanctified, it's consecrated. The Chofetz Chaim writes in one location, if you have an unintelligible animal, a sheep, an ox, a goat, it's ordinary, it's mundane, it's physical. What happens if you consecrate it to be a korban, to be a sacrifice? What happens as a result of the consecration? It becomes a holy entity. It becomes a holy object. It becomes an object of Kedusha. As being an object of Kedusha, you're able to bring it as a sacrifice on the Mizbech, on the altar. As a result of what it is, it has the ability to bring about kapara, atonement. Person inadvertently violated the Shabbos. If it's brought in the proper context by the Kohen, and he officiates properly with the right intent, this mundane physicality, because there was a transition through its consecration, it becomes a holy entity. So a human being who's infused with a neshama, with a soul, if he consecrates himself, what happens? So the animal, the human being is an intellectual animal. What happens when he does the mitzvah? When we say, what is the text? The Anshe Knesset Agdola, they authored all the blessings we say. When you say a bracha prior to doing a mitzvah, what do we say? Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosov, b'tzivanu. You've sanctified us through your mitzvahs. So what is doing the mitzvah? It's a sanctification process. So if we say every mitzvah we do corresponds to a certain aspect of one's being, so what is happening? It's a consecration of the animal. Not only of the physicality of the person, we're speaking about the emotion, the mind, the drive. The drive of the person now becomes a consecrated drive. But if it's consecrated and it's spiritualized, what is its direction? And what direction is it leaning? It's leaning towards serving God. But again, that's only possible if you follow the process. If we say Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, the study of Torah is the ultimate. That is the equivalent of all the positive commandments combined. That supersedes everything combined, brings you to another level of holiness, of consecration. So now, if you consecrate yourself. Now we read in the Tochacha, at the end of Dvorim, in Kisovo, the Torah says, why, God forbid, does Klal Yisrael deserve all the curses? Because when you served him, it was lacking. Asher lo abartas Hashem Elokecha b'simcha b'tuv levav mirov kol. You did not serve God with joy and with good-heartedness, despite the fact that I've given you everything. Hashem says, I've given you everything. You have every conceivable material. So if that's the case, you should serve me without distraction. Fully invested in your purpose. But it says no. You know why, God forbid, all these curses are coming upon you? Asher avarta Hashem Elokecha. You did not. Asher lo avarta Hashem Elokecha b'simcha b'tuv levav. You did not serve God through joy, good-heartedness, mirov kol, despite having given you everything. Why not? Now the question is, we feel, God says we put on tefillin. But you know, people feel it's an infringement. I'm a Jew, I have to do it. I have to study. I have to carve out of my day a period of time that I have to serve him. But I also have a right to live. I have also a right to my life. But God's giving you everything. Mirov kol, there's nothing lacking in your life. So if there's nothing lacking in your life, why don't you serve him with joy and out of good-heartedness? So evidently, the answer is very simple. If a person basically is a physical being, and what does physicality mean? Self-centered. You're into yourself. You focus inward, not outwardly. And where are you inclined? You're inclined as an intellectual animal. So you have all the drives. Now, how do you counter those drives? So there's a conflict, there's a continuous conflict. I want to do what I want, and yet God says you do what I want. We'll make a compromise. I will do it. But where's the joy? And where's the givingness? So how does the person do it? Does it begrudgingly? Begrudgingly. Do I have a choice? God says, if that is your approach, I don't need you to serve me. But God forbid, the whole Tochacha comes upon you. God forbid, exile, death, illness, slavery, deprivation, suffering, which is not to be believed, devastation. Then you'll appreciate what it means to have and what it means that God should be with you. That's the problem. So what's lacking? What's lacking over there is the spiritualization. If a person is not spiritualized, there's a little bit of a contradiction here. Here, the direction is the opposite direction. The person's pulled in the other direction. Yet, you have to somehow suppress. It's more difficult than pushing a boulder up a mountain. How do you push a boulder up a mountain? You can push it up to a point, but ultimately it comes back and crushes you. That's where a person feels that if he's not spiritualized, that's the reality of the physicality of a person, that if he doesn't do it naturally, and he's not drawn to it naturally, what happens to him? You get crushed by it. If you feel you're being suffocated and crushed, what do you say to God? Do I have a choice? The person does it begrudgingly. But why weren't you spiritualized? If you would have invested and toiled in Torah, because Torah is Barasi Yetzabarsa Torah Tavlin. Why is Torah the Tavlin? The Medrash tells us that the reason why the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, so based on the verse in Echo, is Torah Yozavu. They abandoned my Torah. They abandoned it. So because they abandoned my Torah, therefore the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. What do you mean they abandoned the Torah? Why did they abandon the Torah? But it says that they violated the three cardinal sins. The reason why the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because they violated adultery, murder, and idolatry. How do we reconcile the two? What it means, although they study Torah, the Gemara explains, but they didn't study the Torah with a proper mindset. Lo birchu b'Torah tchila. The study of Torah wasn't predicated on Torah blessings. So that means we're talking about intellectualism. It was for the sake of intellectual pursuit. It was not for the sake of studying the Torah, so I should be a greater servant of God. It was lacking in that, as Rashi says. What says mitzvosai tishmru? Have a amelim b'Torah al mnas lishmor l'kayim. You should toil in Torah with the mindset for the sake of observing, retaining, and fulfilling. That's not why they study Torah. There's nothing comparable to it. But the Medrash says, even though they abandoned me, but halavai osei azovu torasi shamaru. Even if they would have, I would have hoped that they would have abandoned me, but at least they continued with the Torah. Why? Because there's something innate in Torah. There's a certain enlightenment in Torah which brings one back to the good path. What is the enlightenment in Torah? If you take something sweet, you put it on your taste buds. You can't deny, and your taste buds are operating properly, you're going to taste something sweet. There's a morshaba. If a person is in a darkened room and therefore you can't see, but you illuminate the area, then you're able to see. Within Torah, there's something within Torah that gives the Jew an enlightenment. It illuminates the person. What's illumination? Illumination doesn't mean all of a sudden you see. What do you see? It gives you a spiritual capacity. Factually, it spiritualizes the person. Even if you abandon me, but if you continuously engage in Torah study, you become spiritualized. What is the blockage? Why don't you have the sense? You don't have the sense because you're a physical animal. We have what we refer to the Nevesh HaBahamis. We have the physical life source within us, which drives us like the beast. The only way you could counter that, you can't go against it. It's nearly impossible. You have to take the beast and you have to spiritualize it. The moment you infuse it with spirituality, it becomes spiritualized, it's no longer the beast. The drive is what? Is diffused. The drive is not there because the animal is no longer there. If the animal is no longer there, then we speak about now you have understanding. Now it begins resonating with you. What is the value? You don't do it begrudgingly any longer. So again, so when it says, you did not serve God with joy and wholeheartedness. Mirov kol. But why? Because what was the priority? The priority was the material. The material was not to facilitate the spiritual, but the material there had its own identity, it had its own value, and it had its own emphasis. Once it has its own emphasis, so you're still a Jew, you're a believing Jew, but who are you? As a human being, as a physical person, you're fully infused with what level of energy? Physical energy. That physical energy manifests itself, that's the animal drive. To stand up against the animal, it's not a simple matter. And because it's not a simple matter, therefore, inevitably, you fail and you do things begrudgingly because you feel God is imposing and infringing on your life. And that's exactly why the Torah comes to teach us an understanding that here I've given you everything. Is this the way you behave? Therefore, God says, I will take it from you because you don't appreciate what I've given to you. Read in Pirkei Avos, Asi Torosha Keva, Melachcha Arai. Your Torah should be primary and your work should be secondary. What does it mean? It's primary. So primary means that is the most important thing in my life. Everything else I do in my life is only to facilitate that. It's only to accommodate that. So what is the emphasis? So therefore, when I take out time to study, it's an infringement on my life. What is my life? What is primary in my life? Torah Keva. What's primary in life is the study of Torah. When you have the Torah, everything else becomes secondary. But you need the Torah. No person was born a tzaddik. The Gemara tells us, Sanhedrin, that a tzaddik is greater than the greatest angel. Could a tzaddik be greater than the greatest angel? We speak about the various echelons of angels. You have Ophanim, you have Chaysa Kodesh. These angels have a level of understanding which we can't even fathom what their level of holiness is in their spirituality. So the tzaddik, who's so limited, in God's eyes, he's greater than the greatest angel. So Reb Chaim Volozhiner explains in his work, a tzaddik is a tzaddik because he chose to be the tzaddik. No one's born a tzaddik. It was through his initiative, through his choice, through his toil, through his sacrifice, by compromising on his physicality, he became a tzaddik. The angel is an angel, regardless of his dimension of understanding and holiness, because God created him in that context. It's unrelated to himself. Nothing's attributed to himself. He's purely a creation of God as an angel. The tzaddik was created, as it says, when God creates a person, everything is predestined except one thing, Rasha or tzaddik. That destiny, whether you be a tzaddik or Rasha, that's not predestined. Because hakol b'yedei Shema chutz mi'Yerushalayim. Everything's predestined except one's fear of heaven. Whether you fear God or you don't fear God, that's dependent upon your own initiative. What is your choice going to be? Are you going to choose to be the tzaddik, or are you going to choose to be something other than that? And that's exactly it. That's why Gedolim Tzaddikim, greater is a tzaddik than the Malchei Ashoris, than the greatest ministering angel. Even the Ophanim, the Chaysa Kodesh, most advanced level of angel, the tzaddik is greater than that, those angels. Now, why doesn't a person come upon truth? As it says, Vasisim Osam, if you toil in Torah, then you will do them. You will do them. Why will you do them? And what is the quality of doing them? Osam is emes. You will come upon truth. Because, again, why don't we come upon truth? We don't come upon truth is because we have too many conflicts. We as physical beings, we have conflicts. What's our conflicts of interest? Our physical needs. But what happens if you toil in Torah? You're fully invested in Torah. What happens to your physicality? As we discussed, it becomes spiritualized. The moment it becomes spiritualized, you no longer have those conflicts. You don't have those material conflicts of interest. So if you don't have the material conflicts of interest, what is the focus? The focus is doing the will of God. Vasisim Osam, you'll do them. Osam are the same letters as emes. Now you do them really for the sake of what it is. It's no longer with the ulterior motive. God, I'm doing because I want you to do for me. It's not a tit for tat. I do this, therefore you're going to reward me. That's not the focus. I'm doing it because I understand now. But why do you understand? Now it fully resonates within you. Because the process is a spiritualization process, as he says. So he says, therefore, a person who keeps all the mitzvos except for one, he says he's like he's handicapped. That part of his body, it's as if he's actually, that limb has been severed from him. Why? Because to be a full functioning person, every aspect of the body, one complements the other. So if you have part of the body that has been spiritualized, what is it? That's a deficiency. It's interesting. He speaks. The Gemara tells us, cites two verses in Mishlei, in Proverbs. Shlomo Melech says that nothing is the equivalent of Torah. Even mitzvos are not the equivalent of Torah. And another pasuk says, no, it's only the material endeavors are not the equivalent of Torah, but mitzvos are the equivalent of Torah. So here, one verse indicates that mitzvos is not the equivalent of Torah, and that's the concept of Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, that the study of Torah has greater value than all the mitzvos combined. And the other verse in Mishlei indicates material endeavors cannot be equated to Torah, but mitzvos can be equated to Torah. So how do we reconcile the two statements of Shlomo Melech? So the Gemara answers like this. A person studying Torah, and a mitzvah presents itself. You have to put on tefillin. You're a male, you have an obligation, you must put on tefillin. Now, but if I put on tefillin, I have to interrupt my Torah study. Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. The study of Torah, innately, its spiritual value is greater than tefillin. It's greater than matzah. It's greater than Kriya Shema. So what gives? What takes precedence over what? So the Gemara answers this, that a mitzvah which can be delegated through a third party. We have certain mitzvahs you cannot delegate. the person has to put tefillin on himself, he can't delegate it to a third party. Eating matzah cannot be delegated to a third party. Taking the 4 species of the lulav cannot be delegated. Sitting the sukkah cannot be delegated. So if a person has to interrupt his Torah study for any one of these things, you must interrupt your Torah study. But what about, let's say, giving charity, giving tzedakah, and you're able to delegate the tzedakah through a third party, attending to the needs of a poor man, and as a result of that, you don't have to interrupt your Torah study. You're not permitted to interrupt your Torah study. Why? But it's a mitzvah. The answer is even the mitzvah is not, its value is not the equivalent of Torah study. That's Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. So if you could reconcile both, one doesn't interrupt this Torah study. But if you cannot reconcile both, of course, as the Gemara says, it's the Efshar Lasus HaYidei Acherim. You're not able to delegate it through a third party, then you must interrupt your Torah study. So the Maral asks, but what's the rationale? But if innately Torah itself is the equivalent, has greater value than all the mitzvahs combined, so whether it could be delegated, whether it can't be delegated, either case, you should interrupt your Torah study. You shouldn't interrupt your Torah study, even if it cannot be delegated. So he goes to explain exactly what we're saying. He says, the body itself has to be spiritualized. As a physical being, we're physical. And unless we're spiritual, we cannot function in the context of serving God. You can't be an oved, a servant of God, if you're a physical being. If all your tendencies and all your inclinations and all your drives are animalistic drives, how do you serve God properly? Every aspect of your being has to be spiritualized. So we speak about the profile, the essence, the function of the Jew, what brings about the spiritualization. The spiritualization, that it should not be considered deficient within a spiritual context, you have to fulfill mitzvahs. So if a mitzvah could be delegated through a third party, that means it's not necessary for you to do it. But a mitzvah which cannot be delegated, as the examples we gave, putting on tefillin, eating matzah, sitting in the sukkah, taking the lulav, that cannot be delegated. Saying the Kriya Shema cannot be delegated, therefore it has to be interrupted. Because that has relevance to your being. Once you're fully spiritualized, now we speak about advancement. How do you advance to the ultimate level? The way you advance to the ultimate level, that's the study of Torah. That's Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. That is the ultimate. That brings a person which transcends every level of achievement of any individual mitzvah. So the mitzvah itself is the spiritualization process. To bring about a transition from the mundane, from the physical to the spiritual. Once you're spiritualized and you're addressing the spiritualization of your physicality, now we speak about advancing beyond that point. But let's you have a conflict. You have to attend to the physicality, to spiritualize the physicality, which cannot be delegated to a third party. That takes precedence over the Torah, because otherwise you're considered physically handicapped within the profile of what you're supposed to be as a servant of God. This is the Maral of Prague. In last week's parsha, we read about the mitzvah of Daled Minim, taking the 4 species on Sukkot. We have the lulav, we have the esrog, we have the hadas, we have the myrtle, and we have the arava, we have the willow. Now, what is the symbolism of these 4 species? So the Midrash says, what I'm telling you should take on the first day of Sukkot, the 4 species of the lulav. It's not that you do it. It's not that I need it. The reason why I'm asking you to do it, because it will bring merit. It will make you meritorious. So he explains, pre-Eitz Hodor, you should take the esrog. That's the citron. Kapos Tmorim is the palm branch. Anaf Eitz Ovos, that's the myrtle, the hadas. Arvi Nochal, the willow. Ma Tivon Shel Arbas Minim Halol. What is the representation of these 4 species? Mehen She'osen Peiros. Some of them produce fruit. The esrog is a fruit. The palm branch is the palm tree, produces dates, fruit producing. Umehen she'enan osen peiros. The willow and the myrtle have no relevance to fruit production. Pri Eitz Hodor kapas tomorrow elu tzadikim. Symbolism-wise, the Priyei Tzodor and the Kapos Tamorim, which is substance, which has innate value, that represents Tzadikim. Sheish Lam Masim Tovim, which who do good deeds, Torah mitzvahs. Anafetz Ovos Varvei Nochal, Elu Beinim Sheish B'Sol. That's the middle of the road Jew, the mediocre Jew. Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kulam Ke'echot Tasa Gudachas. What I want you should all unite and become unified. Kedesh Lo Yeh B'Bonai Psoles. So there should not be among my children any impurity. Psoles means any like chaff, anything which has no value. If you become unified, the tzaddikim with even the ordinary Jew, and you become unified into one unit, there will not be any psoles, there will not be any impurity among my children. Imasisim kain. If you do that, ani misala aleichem. You'll be elevated. Now, what's the understanding? I mean, factually, if there's deficiency among Jews, how by unifying, the fact is that deficiency exists. So the way I understand it is, we find for transgressing the Torah the many levels of liability. If a person, let's say, eats non-kosher meat, eats a non-kosher species, meat that's not ritually slaughtered, what we call nevelo, or a species that's not kosher, what is the liability? Firstly, the transgression is a negative commandment. If you're forewarned and you eat, the liability is lashes, malchus. What about if a person eats on Yom Kippur? A person violates Shabbos without being forewarned. What is the liability? Liability is koris, spiritual excision. You're cut off from God. What happened to certain relationships which you just read about in Achrei Mos Kedoshim? They're incestuous relationship. If one violates those relationships, what is the liability? Koris, spiritual excision. What is the meaning of spiritual excision? God says if you cross that line, you're cut off from me. So if it means that you're excised from God, how should the Torah express itself? V'nichresa hanefesh ahi me'Hashem. That soul will be cut off from God. It doesn't say that. It says v'nichresa hanefesh ahi me'amel. That soul will be cut off from its people. From its people. V'nichresa hanefesh ahi me'Yisrael. That soul will be cut off from the Jewish people. But if you're being cut off from God, it should say you're being cut off from God. You're being excised from God. What does it say, the Jewish people or from its people? The answer is God has no relationship with any individual. God only has a relationship with one nation in existence. Only Klal Yisrael, only Jewish people. At Sinai, when he took us to be his people, and he says, you will be my Goy Kodosh, you'll be my holy people, you'll be Mamleches Kohanim, you'll be the princely, kingly nation of Kohanim. You are my people. I only have a relationship with you, with Klal Yisrael, with the Bnei Yisrael. If you're part of those people, then we have a relationship, because you're part of the whole. If you're a member of those people, we have a relationship. If you're not a member of those people, because you've been cut off from the people, it's not because you ate on Yom Kippur, you did creative activity on Yom Kippur, or Shabbos, you're not part of the people. You're excised from the people. You're excised from people, we have no relationship. So you have to be part of the people. You're part of the people, we have a relationship. If not, we don't have a relationship. Now, the Ramchal writes that every human being, as perfect as he may be, even Moshe Rabbeinu, Nachnu Mo, totally negated to God. The Gemara tells us there were 4 people who never sinned in their lives. Never any spiritual deficiencies. Never sinned. But as perfect as they are, they're finite. How do you take a finite being and turn him into infinite? Only one way. If he attaches himself to God, who's infinite, then you become part of an infinite system. If you become attached to the infinite, you have relevance to the infinite. But if you separate it from that, then you're finite. He gives an example. If you take a branch and you do a proper graft to a tree, and the graft takes, what happens after a period of time? The ecosystem of the tree, the branch becomes part of the ecosystem of the tree. Because it's fully meshes and integrates, it's part of this tree. Identically, lahabdil, a person who cleaves to God. You cleave to God. But if a person has removed himself from the people, you can't cleave to God. You can only cleave to God if you're part of Klal Yisrael. That means you're an upstanding Jew. If you're an upstanding Jew, we can speak about now you've become part of the infinite. Because you're cleaving, you're attaching yourself to the infinite. So now we have Jews. You have tzaddikim, devoutly righteous, pious people. You have ordinary Jews. Unfortunately, ordinary Jews, they have many spiritual shortcomings. But Hashem says, if you take the 4 species, which symbolically represents every segment of the Jewish people, and you unify, what happens? That impurity will be overcome. How? How's it overcome? Now, what is the basis of deficiency? The basis for deficiency is the void. There's a vacuum. Because of that void, you have that deficiency. What happens if you go and you attach that system, that entity, to God himself? And you're able to cleave to God. And you're able to cleave to God, so that deficiency is going to be overcome. Because now it's become part of what? Of the what? Of the infinite system. Now we find by Kabbalah Torah, the Torah tells us that the Klal Yisrael, they camped at the foot of the mountain. It says, Vayichan keneged ahor. We're speaking about millions of people, 600,000 males above the age of 20, besides women and children. Millions of people are at Sinai. And the Torah says, Vayichan ha'om keneged ahor. In the singular. The people camped in the presence of the mountain, at the foot of the mountain, in the singular. It should say Vayachnu. In the plural, they camped. What does it say Vayichan? So Rashi cites Chazal, because when they camped, there was a level of unification, Ki'ish echad b'leiv echad, like one person with one heart. That was the level of unification. What does there have to tell us that? Why? Why is that fact important for us to know? What the level of unity there was among them? The answer is, who is God? Hashem is echad. The only self to echad, you have to reflect that characteristic of echad, of unification. If you're unified, we can talk about a relationship. But if you're fracturalized and there's divisions, you have no relevance. We have no relevance to a relationship. So if you take the Daled meaning, the 4 species of the lulav, and Hashem says, and you bind them into agura achas, into one bond, so these will come and they will compensate for the others. And the psoles, the impurity among my children, is going to be irrelevant. Because the moment you assume the posture of unity, now we can talk about attaching yourself. Now this entity has relevance to attachment. If you're not unified, we can't talk about attachment. Once you're unified, we could attach. Once you attach, it's like you have a deficient system and you attach it to an energy source which is overwhelming. There's no deficiency any longer. The moment you attach to the source, which is Hashem himself, which is infinite, that impurity has no relevance. We say, the Ramchal writes in one location, and Chaim Volozhin cites this also, that after the coming of Mashiach, God will reveal himself to the world. He will remove the contaminated spirit from existence, from the earth. What happens to it? What is contamination, spiritual contamination? It's a void, it's a vacuum. The moment God comes into existence, there's no void, there's no vacuum. Nothing impure can coexist with God. Because God is complete in the absolute sense. He's sholem b'tachlis hashleimus. Therefore, once God reveals himself, enters into existence, there's no void, there's no vacuum, there's no deficiencies. The moment we could cleave to God, because we were assuming his profile of unity, of aguda achas, that even the ordinary people, although there's psolas, there's impurity, doesn't make a difference. But the moment we're unifying the tzaddikim with the beinunim, with the ordinary people, we attach, we achieve completion. We achieve our level of completeness because we're attached to the source. But again, what do you need? What do you need for that attachment? You need, the entity basically has to have a degree of spiritualization. Meaning you're inclined. How do you achieve that inclination to be inclined to spirituality? To have a sense of interest. Initially, it's difficult. We say, initially, when you start off, everything's with an ulterior motive. We need incentives. You'll get honor, you'll get acknowledgement, you'll be compensated materially, many incentives. But there's something innate in Torah. There's morsheba. There's an innate illumination, enlightenment, where you'll appreciate its value. The moment you start appreciating its value, you don't need incentives anymore. You do it because you see and you realize. And what happens? Well, why do you realize it? Because, as it says, because the mitzvos, we become spiritualized. And the moment we become spiritualized, so in what way do we utilize existence? Now, existence, the material, becomes a facilitator. It's to facilitate, it's a means to an end. Material has no value unto itself. The value of material is only to facilitate the spiritual. That's the understanding. Therefore, if you toil in my Torah and you become spiritualized, then the rain will come at its time, the bounty will be unlimited. Just would like to end with one thing. We read in the portion of Kisavo that after you bring the Bikurim, the new fruits, which you begin bringing on Shavuos, and here it speaks specifically that the beginning of the 4th year, a Jew has an obligation that all the tithes that he should have given to the various segments of Klal Yisrael, to the Kohen, to the Levi, to the poor, and you distribute them, you make a confession. It's called Vidu Maser. It's a confession of the Maser. I've distributed everything. I've given to everybody what they were meant to receive. And then the person makes a supplication. Hashkifa mamod kodshecho min hashamayim. Gaze from your holy abode from heaven. Uvorech es amcho Yisrael. And bless your people, Yisrael. It's adom asher nasata lanu. And the earth that you've given us. Kasher nishbatel avosenu eretz zovos chol v'dvosh. As you promised our forefathers, a land that flows with milk and honey. So what exactly is the person saying? He says, we've done ours. So Rashi cites Chazal, Medrash. Osinu masher gazarto leinu. We've done what you decreed upon us. Aseato masher lecho. Now you must do what's incumbent upon you. And what's incumbent upon you? You said, that if we follow your statutes, the rain will come in their time. So we've done. I brought the Bikurim. I distributed the tithes to the various parties which were supposed to get them. We've done ours. Now you have to do yours. We just said, if you follow my statutes, means you toil in Torah. It has nothing to do with bringing the new fruits and the new grain to the Beis HaMikdash or the distribution of the various tithes to the Kohen, the Levi, the poor. It has nothing to do with this. So how do we reconcile both statements in Chazal, in the Midrash? The understanding is, over there, the person says, I've done what you commanded me to do. What did you command me to do? To give away significant portions of my profits. Somachti v'simachti. I rejoiced in doing this, and I brought others joy. I rejoiced, and others rejoiced. So the recipient of something of value it doesn't have, financial value, of course he rejoices. But the one who has to make the outlay, 20, 30% of your profit margin, how could you be samachti? How could I rejoiced? When I gave it away, I rejoiced. Now, how do you rejoice when you give away more than you retain for yourself? If a person wants to put money into a deal, guaranteed a 200,000% return, did you give it away or did you receive? If you appreciate the nature of the investment, of the outlay, it's a pit. It's nothing. It's meaningless. But how do you have that level of appreciation? When I take a significant amount of money and I invest it in mitzvah, in spirituality, how do I see it in a context that this is my ultimate opportunity and privilege? Into Amelim Torah. A person is fully invested in Torah. He toils in Torah. And he studies Torah. And therefore he becomes fully spiritualized. When you're fully spiritualized, then we can talk about, I rejoice and I brought joy to others. I rejoice that I had the opportunity. You thank God a million times that he gave you the opportunity to be a Jew and to be invested fully in his service. But who understands that? Only the person who's spiritualized. The person who's the physical being, he says the man is an archaic Jew. He's backward. What does he understand? Ignorance is bliss. He doesn't even know what the world is about. That's why he's ecstatic. But unfortunately, he only sees it because he's that physical, he's that intellectual animal. What does the intellectual animal understand about spirituality? He's not been spiritualized. All his drives and all his inclinations are going in the opposite direction. It's only in that we say, samachti v'simachti, because as you said, if you follow my statutes and you toil in my Torah and you do the mitzvahs and you study with that mindset to do the mitzvahs properly, so what's the level of infusion of spirituality that the person receives? The most advanced. When you have that level of spiritualization, the person, this is the ultimate level of joy. There was a person lived the same time as the Vilna Gaon. His name was Rebbe Alexander Ziskind, Zecher Tzaddik Levrocha, of blessed memory. And he writes in his work, he has a work based on the Zohar, on commentary on tefillah, prayer, weekday, Shabbos, Yom Tiv, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, festivals. Over there he writes that when he says the blessing, Asher bocha bonu mikol ha'amim, he thanks God, you've chosen us from all the nations. He says, when a Jew says that bracha, you should dance from joy that you feel like you're going to jump out of your flesh. That's the level of joy a Jew should experience. You understand this? How many Jews say the bracha? Have you ever seen anything like this? Person wins a lottery ticket. $500 million, the largest win ever in the United States. The person needs a tranquilizer to come in. He's ecstatic to a level he can't contain his joy. Because God chose us of all the people and gave us his Torah. Why was he able to internalize it to such a degree? The answer is because even the Vilna Gaon referred to him as a chosid. He was the true chosid. He was fully invested in serving God in every moment of his existence. So if you have that degree of spiritualization, how do you see being chosen by God? What does it mean doing a mitzvah? What does it mean God gave you something that the world was created for its purpose? You can't contain yourself. Impossible to contain yourself. But we, unfortunately, which we don't have that degree of spiritualization, it's something we should strive for or aspire to, then we'd have an understanding, or hopefully we should have an understanding to appreciate the words of the Yisod V'Shorish Avoda.